Shana Tova. I'm Alex Eichel, President of Temple B'nai Shalom, and it's truly wonderful to see all of you this morning, almost afternoon. I said this last night, and I'll say it again for those joining us this morning for the first time. One of the most meaningful parts of serving in this role is getting to connect with so many of you in different ways throughout the year. And so having the chance to see you all gathered in this space is really quite special. And to our family and friends and guests that are joining us for these high holy days, we are so glad you are here celebrating at TBS. Thank you to Rabbi Widzer and Cantor Lindsay for guiding us through this morning's service in worship, teaching, and song. And thank you to our choir for the beautiful melodies and harmonies this morning. You all have outdone yourselves yet again. And it would not be Rosh Hashanah at TBS without Rosita Goldstein's honey cake, so be sure to enjoy a little oneg after services out front. The rain will hold off for honey cake, and hopefully will also hold off until after Tashlich. And just a few housekeeping notes. The flyers and brochures on your seats or nearby highlight our Yom Kippur offerings and our Life, Learning is for Everyone course offerings for the coming year, both of which you can take home and put on your refrigerator. And any remaining papers, please gather in a neat stack in your row. And we will also be putting our prayer books away after this service in preparation for our family service. So to make it easier on our volunteers, please pass your prayer books down to the end of each row to leave in a nice stack at the end of our service. If you did not receive a grocery bag from Beastie last night, please make sure to grab one on your way out this morning and bring them back on Yom Kippur, filled with all of the foods listed on the front of the bag. And lastly, we have a very, very full house this morning, and we have a lot of you parked over at the church. We are very thankful to have access to that lot, but please be careful as you are driving. We will be sharing the road with those who are walking to the path. Later today, we have two family services, a service for our 3rd through 6th graders at 2 p.m. and a service for 2nd graders and under at 3:15, and at 4:30, we will conclude with Tashlich at Burke Lake. Writing these messages to you over Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are arguably one of the more important outward-facing things that I do at TBS. In fact, before I even became president, I went to a workshop on High Holy Day speech writing for soon-to-be presidents. The problem is, what is left to say? You've already heard my story, and you've heard our story, and I've let you know how important you are to me and how important you are to this community and to our survival. And all of that is still true, but I didn't think you deserved a repeat. So on Sunday, I came to Temple and sat at the bagel bar and gave explicit directives to my exec board members to not let me do anything else except write my speeches. And they tried. But this is what actually happened. I made a grocery list. I cleaned out all of the podiums on the bima. I located every fire extinguisher in the building to make sure our building map was accurate. And I took inventory and reorganized all of our first aid supplies in the building. And it's not that I haven't been thinking about what to write. I've been thinking for months. And all of my thoughts have been swirling around in my head, and everything is so heavy, and everything is constantly changing, and our messages to stay hopeful and positive and love TBS through it all start to feel disingenuous. So I'm bringing it back to the core, to the big tent. Over the summer, I found myself listening to a Jewish podcast called Chutzpah. And on this episode, a panel of Jewish rabbis and scholars were addressing the question, how big should the tent be? The big tent, a broad metaphor often used for the Jewish community, a concept that encompasses the moral, spiritual, and intellectual core of the Jewish people, is a metaphor not only for inclusion, but also one for scale. How big does the tent grow? Is there room for everyone? Where do we draw our lines in the sand? And I was drawn to Rabbi Sharon Cohen Anisfeld's response. She is the current president of Hebrew College, and upon looking her up, has a striking resemblance to Debbie Friedman. She said, when we are talking about the big tent, we're talking about belonging. how deeply we long to belong, how painful it is to turn people away, and how painful it is to be turned away. In verses from the prophet Isaiah, and I fact-checked these, Isaiah 54, verses 2 and 3, Isaiah talks about expanding the boundaries of the tent, and he says two things. He says to expand the tent, you have to lengthen the ropes. And in the same verse, he says, lengthen the ropes, but drive the pegs firm. The pegs in this metaphor being the roots of Jewish life, meaning and purpose, our values, our relationship with Torah, our relationship with God, and our relationships with each other. Our tent can expand, we can lengthen the ropes, but the pegs have to be driven in firm to withhold the vastness and the weight of our tent. At TBS, our physical tent is of modest size. We wish it included a real kitchen and a Minion Makers chapel and a few more classrooms, but Isaiah didn't say anything about kitchens and Minion Makers in classrooms in his prophecy. But our TBS community, our metaphorical tent, is big and bellowing. There is room for everyone because our pegs are driven in firm. Our TBS values are the pegs of our tent, of course, and all of the decisions that we make are rooted firmly in our values. We can say this about our governance and policies, our covenant and our vision for philanthropy. And we can say this about our worship, and we can say this about our religious school, and we can say this about each other. And that does not mean that we are or should be the same or hold the same opinions. Our tent is big enough and strong enough to hold each one of us. And even when we disagree in big ways and in small ways, it is the counterbalance of our thoughts and opinions that keep the ropes taut. Because we know that our pegs are driven and rooted firmly into the ground, rooted in our values of sacred community, respect, intention, Torah, caring for one another, and caring for our world. It is important to remember this, that we come to this tent looking for comfort and safety. We come here to learn and to love and to surround ourselves with familiarity and space to breathe. We come here when we are sad or angry or feeling something so complicated we can't put it into words. We come here on our best days and on our worst days. All of that lives in our tent, and it is our job to guard the sanctity of this space for all of us. And it is equally important to remember this, that we come to this tent with our experiences, our thoughts and opinions, our rationale, our resolutions. We won't always agree. We will see things differently. But instead of discounting or judging in ways that close us off from solutions, listen for the values, listen for the nuance, listen for common ground. Allow for conversation even when we are tired of talking. Identify our values and conflicts so that you can hold your truth and appreciate another truth. When we lose sight of our values for the sake of being right, our pegs loosen, the ropes become slack. Our tent gets smaller and weaker, and we cannot afford to be swept away by the next strong wind. So as we enter this new year together, let us keep lengthening the ropes of our tent, making room for more voices, more stories, more possibilities. And at the same time, let us drive our pegs even deeper into the firm ground of our values. That is how we stay strong, how we stay open, and how we ensure that this sacred community will not just survive, but thrive. May our tent always be wide enough to welcome each of us and strong enough to carry all that we bring. Shana Tova.